In the burning summer of 1863, while cannons thundered at Gettysburg far to the north, an unspoken darkness was spreading silently through the valleys of Middle Tennessee. Federal agents later uncovered that 73 men, women, and children had disappeared within only a year and a half from one single plantation called Rosewood Manor. These victims were not runaway slaves. They were not deserters hiding from armies. They were not casualties of raiding troops. They were ordinary laborers. Poor widows, immigrants, and whole families who had signed contracts for honest work, yet never returned. What made this more horrifying was not only the number of lives taken, but also the careful precision with which each life was erased. Records of possessions were written with perfect penmanship. Bodies were lowered into hidden earth and soaked in quicklime so that nothing remained. Federal authorities sealed the findings in locked cabinets for generations. The case would sleep beneath dust-covered files until the truth resurfaced too late for justice. Tonight you will step into the world of Ezekiel Chamberlain, his wife Margaret, and their twin sons, Daniel and Samuel, who built their wealth upon 73 silent graves. Do not look away, for this tale will test everything you thought you knew about Southern gentility. Before we continue, ensure you are subscribed, because the revelations within this account will chill you long after the story ends. And tell us in the comments which city or state you watch from, because each response helps keep the memory of these hidden tragedies alive. Rosewood Manor stood upon fertile black earth in Rutherford County, not far from Nashville. Its columns soared like marble sentinels. Built in 1834 by Josiah Chamberlain, father of Ezekiel, the house gleamed with 3 tall stories, 6 Corinthian pillars, and broad galleries wrapped around polished brick. Inside glimmered French chandeliers, carved fireplaces of Italian stone, and seasoned mahogany walls that had waited 7 long years before installation to visitors. The building stood as a symbol of aristocratic triumph to neighbors who watched cotton wagons roll out in wartime. Plenty, it became a riddle. How could one estate thrive when all around collapsed? Ezekiel Chamberlain inherited more than property from his father. He possessed tall stature, piercing gray eyes, prematurely silver hair, and a calculating mind that never rested. At 42, he was admired by some and feared by others. Though his hands looked soft, they carried hardened marks, not from farming, but from darker pursuits. When Union soldiers occupied Nashville, many plantation owners fled south, but Ezekiel remained. He proclaimed neutrality. But in secret, he sold the same cotton twice, first to Confederate buyers, then to Union officers who seized cargo. Along routes, his strategy made him rich while others starved. That cunning, however, was only the surface his wife Margaret once praised. For beauty now radiated a severe presence. Her handwriting filled household ledgers with endless detail, listing candles, consumed spoons, counted bread loaves, eaten. Yet her private discussions with Ezekiel planned acts that no record preserved. Their sons Daniel and Samuel were born minutes apart, but opposite in form. Daniel, thin, nervous, forever pushing his spectacles, studied chemistry and bookkeeping before war ended his education. Samuel, broader, violent, and restless, loved physical cruelty. Together, they reflected the cold brilliance of their parents. In 1862, after Emancipation Proclamation shook the system, Ezekiel offered wages, $2 each day with shelter and food, far more than factories in Memphis or Nashville paid. Desperate men and women signed contracts binding them for 2 years, wages held in trust until service ended to families. This seemed opportunity in chaos. In truth, it was bait none of them would ever collect. Martha Henley, the first to raise alarm, searched for her brother Thomas, a blacksmith, who had vanished after working 6 weeks at Rosewood. She asked Sheriff Coleman Briggs for help. Briggs knew Thomas as reliable and sober, yet Daniel Chamberlain claimed he was drunk, and thieving witnesses signed statements describing misconduct. The papers were flawless, but Briggs felt deception. Days later, Martha herself was found drowned in Stones River. Her treasured photograph missing. The death was called accident, yet suspicion deepened and won by. One more family's reported missing relatives, a carpenter named James Patterson, a young Irish seamstress called Ellen Walsh, the Freeman family of 4, who sold their farm for New Hope. All vanished. Ezekiel produced papers for each case perfect. Explanations: theft, desertion, or misconduct, yet belongings stayed behind, and no one returned. Josiah Creek, the overseer of Rosewood, had worked for Chamberlains since 1834. With arms like tree trunks and weathered face, he had enforced harsh discipline for decades, but what he witnessed in 1863 disturbed even him. He noticed food supplies lasting longer than expected. Records listed 67 workers, yet he could count barely 39. Sometimes late at night, he saw Daniel and Samuel with 2 pale strangers carrying satchels of surgical instruments moving through workers' cabins. Each visit ended with another missing person. Curiosity at last overcame his fear. One humid April night, Creek followed quietly and saw the brothers carry a heavy stained sack from a cabin to woods beyond family graves. Ezekiel stood there with the pale men, and quicklime filled the air as sack lowered into earth. His chilling words echoed through trees. 73 souls to build an empire. Creek, horrified, crept further until he found the barn transformed into a chamber of death. Vats of quicklime, dissolved flesh, jewelry, rings, lockets, tools, sorted upon long tables. Familiar belongings of missing workers, stacked like merchandise in Daniel's handwriting. Ledger books listed names, dates, possessions, and amounts. Human beings reduced to numbers. Creek realized this was no desperate act, but an organized slaughterhouse. Fear drove him to flee, but dogs pursued him. Samuel shouted orders as hounds tracked scent. Creek broke his leg falling into a ravine, his cries muffled as men searched. Above, by chance, a Union scout, William Hayes, observed the scene. Hayes had been watching Rosewood for unusual activity. He discovered Creek half conscious, begging that 73 souls lay buried. Hayes carried him to Nashville. Authorities dismissed story at first, but Creek described exact barns, hidden graves, and records. His testimony forced investigation. On May 15, 1863, Union soldiers surrounded Rosewood. What they uncovered shocked hardened officers. Vats, maps, graves, and ledgers confirmed every word. But Chamberlain family fled, warned by allies. Their mansion abandoned, belongings left behind, evidence undeniable. But killers gone. The barn contained records of killings since 1861. Prophets, calculated names, itemized values. Medical brothers Cornelius and Edgar, Polk deserters from Confederate ranks, had assisted using chloroform and morphine to end lives without marks. Families lured through newspaper advertisements, contracts, boarding house operators, and labor agents. Complicit, all selected for vulnerability. Widows, immigrants, freedmen, all easily silenced. Federal troops excavated 73 graves, bones, fragments, clothing, yet enough to prove crimes. But Ezekiel, Margaret, Daniel, and Samuel had vanished. Rumors placed them in Mexico, South America, or even Europe. Their accomplices, the Polk brothers, were found dead in Cumberland River. Throats cut, silenced forever. Rosewood seized, transformed into Union Hospital, later abandoned for decades, until demolished by railroad company in 1884. Today, only a marker remembers victims. Inscribed, their names are known to God. Creek survived, limping through life, haunted by guilt. His final statement years later revealed that actual deaths might exceed 100 victims. Targeted included travelers, vagrants, and runaway slaves. Never reported, he admitted he had suspected months before, but fear silenced him until too late. He warned that similar hidden crimes might have existed elsewhere. Across the South, war created shadows where cruelty thrived. The Chamberlain case stands among darkest chapters of American history. Ezekiel, mastermind; Margaret, manager; Daniel, meticulous bookkeeper; Samuel, violent enforcer. Polk brothers, cold physicians. Together, they created machinery of murder, disguised as plantation. They proved that evil can dress in elegance and smile politely. While turning neighbors into ashes, the question remains what fate befell them. Some believe they died fleeing, others think they lived under false names in distant lands. What matters is that 73 graves and perhaps more whisper beneath. Tennessee soil, the pursuit of wealth can transform human beings into horrors beyond legend. What do you think was the ultimate fate of the Chamberlain family? Do you believe other plantations hid crimes never revealed? Share your thoughts below. And if you seek more stories of forgotten horrors, subscribe, ring the bell, and share with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Until next time, remember, the most terrifying monsters are those who look most ordinary.